Shall we begin?
So it begins. And now it begins. So it begins.
And so it begins.
Shall we begin?
Shall I begin? Shall we begin? Shall we begin? Shall we begin?
What's up, everybody? Glad to be back to doing some film talk. It's been quite a while since doing this again. Just got my gear back and rolling for doing YouTube videos and stuff. And I got a cool guest today, Kamron Pasha, very well known around here by now, I assume, for everybody in the YouTube sphere. So yeah, how's it going, man? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Let me unmute myself. I was talking.
There we go.
Perfectly. Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you. I'm honored to be on your channel, and I hope I can provide some interesting insights for some of your viewers.
All right, yeah, let's see about that. No, I'm just kidding. I guess let's just get right into it, man. A little bit. So a little bit about me. I grew up. See about that. Yeah, on. I think it's actually
some feedback here. Hold on, something
on
weird stuff always happens on the internet. Please go on.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Yeah, I wasn't into film so much when I was growing up. Oddly, I watched movies casually, but then like after I graduated, I was trying to figure out what the heck to do. I even tried going into like career placement classes and tests, and like the highest thing was like science, but that's not what I want to do. And then at some point, I was just like, man, I've been writing my whole freaking life though, in a way. Like I wanted to do stories. I thought I wanted to be an author. But then at some point I was like, man, I want people to see what I'm seeing though. So eventually got in the mind to, okay, I guess movies. Yeah, okay, let's see about that. And then went to my college, and there was only one film class, man, just intro to cinema. Now, so
it was like a history of kind of
I mean, it was kind of like it just went over the very thin line basis, like some of the camera angle names, and we watched a couple of movies from there, like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Tampopo being John Malkovich, couple weird ones that were like, okay,
that's interesting. That's an interesting range there.
Yeah, and like I barely learned anything in there, but what I did learn was that there's like YouTubers that do stuff, and like Chris Stuckman was one, or Channel Awesome, and pretty much eventually started. I was like, okay, I could start a YouTube channel. I should just pick up a camera and start trying to learn, because there's no school where I live. Around here, I'm in Washington State, and there's just not any actual film schools. I'd have to go quite a bit out of my way to go and actually find one. And
yeah, they're just colleges with film classes, as far as I'm
pretty much. Yeah, they teach what you could learn online anyway, I assume, and none of them actually give you the real on-field experience that ones would want to be a filmmaker. So I'm
here's a little secret. Yeah. Most of the schools in LA, and I'm a graduate of the UCLA MFA program, right, in film studies, and so most of the film schools in Los Angeles also don't give you anything more than what you can get. What they give you is a network. They give you a network because your friends are going to go off and work on projects, right?
Yeah,
and that's how you get hired, which is easier to do if your friends are all already in Los Angeles and can access in. If you're, there are film schools in Florida and other places, which they tend to feed their local communities, which are not huge.
Wow, yeah, the New York Film Academy was the one that came up the most on my searches, and I'm like, I'm not moving to New York. I don't know about that.
Well, there's a New York Film Academy campus in New York, and there's one in Los Angeles, and they do a lot of filming at Universal Studios. I've had several friends that have gone through that program. It's I think a very solid program. But those are the two. New York and the LA are where film is largely centered still.
True. But yeah, I mean, with at least for my area right now, I was like, okay, I'll just pick up a camera and see what I can do for now and see what I can learn, because I was writing. I always thought I could write a story and then sell it for some reason for a little while. I think that's probably a classic thing people go through when they learn about film. Oh, I'll just write something and then somebody will get it, and that's simple as that. And it was not. I was writing things and I could never finish a script because I would keep on going back and thinking about stuff. I'd be like, man, okay, what about this? And then I'd go, okay, well, we need to know if their parents real quick, and where are they from? Okay, so that's what they're doing. And then I'm like going into backstories that aren't important, and I'm like, I'm never going to get anything done.
That's part of the journey of mastering that craft, and just you have to also remember something that I believe it was Da Vinci said this, and if it's not Da Vinci, it's somebody like him, but Da Vinci allegedly said this, which is art is never finished, it's just abandoned. He was on Mona Lisa when he died. I mean, Mona Lisa was there in his room when he died. It's an unfinished painting, right? So that's the constant. At some point, you have to say it's good enough, and I'm going to put it out there, right? That's the hard part.
Yeah, which through YouTube is how I kind of learned how to do that. I was like, if I'm going to make a video, I got a camera and then I got an editing system, but then I'm like, what am I going to film with this thing? Like, I'm the only one here. So what am I going to do? So I eventually created like characters and they all just ended up being variations of my own name of Jeff. So I have Jeffrey, the Jeffster, Jeffy Fro, the Jeffinator. I made all these different versions of characters and would learn how to write the scripts, make a short script, and then finish it, edit it, everything, film it, and get through it. And I've grown a lot in doing that. And eventually I even started doing stop motion when
stop motion, that's not easy.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I'm not doing like hardcore stop motion because I don't have like action figures that actually stand up well enough to move with. The whole idea was inspired from, you remember when Captain Marvel came out and Rotten Tomatoes was being really weird how they're hiding things on their website. And I was like, I wouldn't it be funny if there was like a video on YouTube where they do something with tomatoes, and the best thing I could find was people squishing them a little bit with their feet. And I'm like, there's no like slaughtering of tomatoes or anything.
That's weird stuff. Okay.
That's weird. So I was like, okay, let me make a video with that. I'll buy some tomatoes. I'll make a little video. And was sort of starting to learn how to do stop motion. I didn't look into how to do it. And then it was a pretty poor video, but it was like, oh yeah, they worship Brie Larson. That's their god. And they love all these things.
They don't even worship Brie Larson. They worship an idea of Brie Larson, right? She's an actor. She's playing, I even think that the image she created around Captain Marvel was a created image, and it caused a backlash that maybe her PR people like, well, that's not the image we're going to go with, right? I mean, these are just, as when you work more and more with actors, you realize most of them are literally just, they're trying to give the audience what it wants, right? And they're not actually authentic to themselves. And so her PR people probably told her that's with the empowered woman story we got to put out there, right? It didn't quite work out that way, but that's an affectation, right? So
yeah, no, I agree with that. But at the time, that was just what I went with. I was like, it was focused on Brie Larson. So I was like, they hail Brie Larson, they love her, and made a little stop motion tomato thing, and then eventually made like parodies of things. So I made Game of Tomatoes, like Game of Thrones.
That's good.
They fight the Skywalkers. I had Luke and Anakin Skywalker figures and had them do that stuff. And I did one that I'm still working on now called Tomato Wars, which is like parodying Star Wars.
This is becoming your thing, man. The tomatoes.
A little bit.
Okay?
And people love the tomatoes. And at the end of each series, I usually slaughter them in various different ways, either throwing them over with a car, drowning them, and I put little voices like, oh no, people didn't die and drowning. So it's little things like that. And I've learned a lot of tricks with editing through that. So like that's sort of how I've been learning how to film, and like with acting.
That's the best way. Peter Jackson, who is my personal modern favorite filmmaker, right? Peter Jackson. Everyone always says it's Spielberg. Mine is Peter Jackson, and it's fascinating when you look at him. He's a self-taught filmmaker. He started off in New Zealand, basically with a crappy camera and making a zombie movie in his backyard with his buddies. Which eventually he actually submitted to the Cannes Film Festival. Bad Taste. I've watched it. It's not a good movie, man. But it's a bad movie. But what is good, you look at it, it's like, all right, well, the movie sucks, right? The acting, the acting is terrible, the writing is terrible. But his zombies' heads exploding. That's a kid in his backyard. That looks real.
Yeah,
and then you realize what his angle is. He's able to make these monsters look really good. And
there's some talent in the madness.
Yeah. And so, I mean, but that's a journey. I mean, he started off with stop motion. That was his passion as well. He grew up in all those Alibaba and Sinbad type of, the classic stop motion stuff in the '60s, and that's what inspired him.
Yeah, and that's actually funny. Like, I don't have a history with stop motion. I never really was into it until recently, and I've recently just got into it, and it's pretty fun, pretty cool. I saw a thing just where it was a time lapse of like the person working on just like a werewolf transformation with claymation, and it's like the amount of pictures, the amount of time, the amount of looking at that, just one thing, barely any difference as you're doing it, and like that's the mental power to do that is insane. And I don't know, it's like I've been learning about film through doing this. The Script Doctor, you might have seen him on here as I talked to him with the channel. He's described it like I'm trying to run before I learn how to walk. Like, yeah, that's
well, I mean,
true.
All of the industries are just thrown on the ground, and then basically it's like it's basically like D-Day. Here's a gun. You're like 2 weeks ago you were in Omaha. Here's a gun. Now you're in France, and you have people shooting at you. Figure it out.
Yeah. I gotcha. I mean, I feel like I'm learning in a good way from that, and I've interacted with people on YouTube here and tried to have them in my projects. And like I did, the last one I did where I did that was the Rookie's Quest, And at the very end, I had everybody give me energy, like through like Dragon Ball Z style, if you ever did that. And so like it was like 100 or there's like 80 people giving their energy, and I had cameos throughout with everybody and trying to utilize people through that. And it's funny because with COVID, I feel like in a way that's how people would make movies now at their homes and try to intermingle with them. That's kind of segueing into what I want to talk about, which is like, what do you or before we go into that, I'll say hello to the chat real quick.
Please.
What's up?
Go on, chat.
Yep. What's up, everybody? Glad seeing y'all here. Got Mr. CD or CCDV. Yeah, I recommend just start filming your script. Yeah, exactly. That's what I've learned over time. Like I can't, if I have to take longer. It depends on what type of story you want to tell with the script, I suppose. If it's something that I'm trying to make myself, I want it to be done quicker. If it's something that I want to have like a big production and people with, I'd probably want to take a long time on the script to make sure it's actually good. So that, because I feel like that's what ends up lasting. I would think. What's up, Orville Nation? He just hit 5,000 subs, I think, recently. What's up, man? Good seeing you here. Good seeing you here. We've got the Gannicus 82. I love that name, man. Spartacus style, like that.
Well, you had some scenes from Spartacus, a TV show, in your opening sequence.
Yeah, do you like that? Do you like that show?
Yeah, I like that show a lot. And it was very tragic when the original actor passed away at the end of the first season, right?
I know.
They bounced back from it, but he was great. I mean, that guy was a struggling actor. Then he got his one break, and then he passes away unexpectedly. He's just. First season ends, he's getting all these award nominations, getting all this attention, goes in for a regular checkup. You've got this late stage cancer that nobody knows about, and boom, 3 months later, he's gone, right?
Yeah, insane. I mean, that must have been difficult for the people on the set to work around with. Like, that was our guy, and now we got to get a new guy, and then to be the new guy in that role.
Yeah, and then the guy they brought in was a decent guy, but you're overshadowed by the situation. So
yeah, true, very true. And what's up, Joseph Wemp? Yeah, I wish more people saw Spartacus. Not that many people I know watch it. I'm like, dude, that's like, it's only 4 seasons. It doesn't drag itself out too long. It ends and right where it needs to end.
It's solid. I think initially from the pilot, their goal had been to try to do some very 300 type style. And then they just didn't sustain that. I guess it was financially, creatively not what they wanted to do.
From what I heard, they wanted to do lots of different like mixed martial arts wrestling type of situations. That's why you see a lot of the time they'll end up using their fists instead of their weapons, or they'll do some type of weird flippy thing with the guy that they're wrestling around with, and we're trying to make it cool. So in a way, they started with trying to they wanted get the character of Gannicus to be like a Han Solo Hercules type of character. They just started with low substance first, and then added their story to make it cool and fit the scene. So they did great on that part.
Good. And ultimately, it was a good story. It was good character development, and I do feel like there was something about how it's going to end. If Spartacus doesn't survive, that's the end of the historical thing. But there was just something about the way it ended that felt a little. Like I'd wanted a little bit more of an ending, and it is what it is. It ended. He gets killed and whatever. But it felt very interruptus, like coitus interrupted. Like, okay, I guess the show's over now.
Yeah, in a way, I kind of liked it like that though, because it felt like there was this hype, and then it just got the air taken out of you, and that's his death, and it's like, like that sucks. That's just their slave rebellion. They thought they could do it. Nope. And all the people that they thought were survived, they got killed by Pompey too. It's like, oh, damn, this sucks. That was a interesting way to end that.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. The whole situation, I went and then got a book on the history of Spartacus, right? And I was just saying hi to her. And then I mean, it was a pretty amazing period, and that whole thing. In some ways, even the show didn't show how grandiose it was. That whole thing when they were trapped on Vesuvius. I mean, that was insane. And then how it wasn't. I mean, in the show, it's basically 3 guys come down a bunch of vines and attack. Yeah. It was pretty much he had his whole army climbing down vines from the peak of Vesuvius, right? Mountain Blue, right? And just attack these guys from behind. It was pretty epic. I mean, just probably physically impossible to film the actual scale of what they did.
Well, and I think even when they were under the House of Bardiardus, like how they showed it toward the end of the show, toward the last 2 episodes of the first season, it was supposed to be like that, but worse the whole season. I think like it was supposed to be the most harsh house of all of them, and then they finally were able to do it. It wasn't just for a couple days. It's pretty tough, but yeah.
That's good. It was a good show. So excellent. So we got a few of my friends are like Steffi Janicek. She's cool. She's got her own channel. Glad to see her on here supporting.
Yep, she's cool. Seen her around here a lot. Yeah, we made it.
This is here, Mr. Wamp, who's recently followed me. Yeah. So
hell yeah, I like seeing you guys around here. Love it. Yeah, so I was gonna segue into I was gonna start asking you. So yeah, about filmmaking today now.
Yeah.
Post COVID, it's 2021, and everything's, I assume, been extremely slowed down in most sectors. Though I feel like just from trailers I've been seeing, it's starting to pick back up. Is like, I don't know. I'm trying to go through the film process because I haven't actually been a filmmaker myself, but usually you got to go to all these locations to film specific things, and those can take weeks sometimes to do certain shots at certain spots. And I don't assume they can do that as easily now these days. They have.
That's been the problem. Filmmaking took a major punch to the face last year, and the whole industry almost buckled to nothing, right?
Yeah.
And that's just the industry. That's just the production part of it. We're not even talking about distribution with theaters, which is dying as well, unfortunately. But the biggest issue becomes, well, it's all linked obviously to the lockdowns and all of that. And I'm going to say something here.
Sure.
Anyone who follows me knows that I have a slightly mainstream opinion about the lockdowns. So certainly not mainstream as in the official Hollywood narrative. I'm very much on the fringe of it, right?
Yeah.
The official Hollywood narrative is whatever the government is saying is correct. Whatever Dr. Fauci says is correct. You just have to, even if he changes it the next day, you go with what he does the next day, right? And so I have been questioning this entire thing from the beginning. I continue to question it, and that's only accelerated with time. But the official narrative of Hollywood is that, we are under this extreme situation, and we must put very extreme restrictions to try to save everyone's lives, right? That's the official narrative. The challenge became that when people actually started implementing what they thought was the safest possible way to work in this environment, it became almost impossible to film, right? Because suddenly, you're being told we can't have more than one person working the camera. Anyone who works on a professional film shoot knows that the camera has at least 4 or 5 people working it, right? And and so suddenly you're being told one person, 2 people, and they have to be this distance. Like, how are you going to actually lift the camera? How are the grips going to do their work? And so the official restrictions that were put into place made it very, very difficult to film. And the end result was this. I work a lot in television, and so I saw this. A lot of my friends were working on TV shows that had been greenlit, for their season in early spring, just as these events started to happen. And they went through the summer doing their sort of Zoom writers' rooms. Nobody met in an office, and everyone did their Zoom writers' room. And they created the scripts, 10, 15, whatever, 13 scripts for the season. Yeah. And by the fall, when it came time to actually put those into production, the studios looked and said, under the current rules, we can't actually make the show. Right, it's not physically possible, or if it did, the amount of restrictions and the time and the delays and the unit overflow.
They won't get the return they want with it.
Exactly, they won't get the return they want. And so several friends of mine were on shows that they assumed that, okay, I wrote the scripts, we're going to production, and then the plug was pulled. So they got paid for the scripts, and then they were out. The show itself was canceled. That's multiple shows, right? And then that situation really became challenging. And then you have shows that are filming, Hollywood shows or Netflix shows that are filming in Europe and particularly in Britain. You've got shows like The Witcher, which are filming in the UK, and the UK in particular has a lot of restrictions. Yeah. So what began to happen, and you're beginning to see the news coverage of it, is what I predicted was going to happen, is that Hollywood has to always balance the official narrative it puts out there for PR purposes versus the practical reality of what is actually happening. And usually there's a very large distance between the official image and reality, right? And that distance began to assert itself. And so suddenly people said, okay, we actually have to make this movie, or we have to make the show. And so little by little, or fast by fast, you start having productions stop paying attention to the rules. So start looking away, right? And doing things. And then you started seeing news reports are coming out now about how the studios basically will assign some poor, like low-level assistant to be the COVID watchdog. And that poor person is there to just be the person, all right, we got somebody doing it. And then that person will report, oh, they're too close here. And everyone just ignores that person. But they've officially got the person who's got their eye on there, right?
Present.
The person with no power or authority. And this is the article literally like these young 18-year-old kids who are assistants, who are production assistants are being told, you're the COVID manager. And that's a way to just make this thing go away, because that poor kid doesn't have any power or authority. And everyone's just ignored them because they want. And, you've had a few moments where the PR has to go in. That whole Tom Cruise drama was just PR. That Tom Cruise drama was just PR, where he's yelling at these 2 poor, crew people who were trying to watch a monitor, and he felt they were too close to each other. So he's screaming at them for 2 minutes. And that's all intentional PR to show that Tom Cruise cares and that the studio cares. And those poor crew members had to be humiliated for this PR, right? But that's what it is. And the reality is people are filming and largely ignoring and keeping quiet that they're not obeying the rules, because they can't actually come out and say, maybe the rules don't work. Or maybe maybe the fear has been hyped up, because they say that they'll be attacked. So they'll just publicly say, whatever Dr. Fauci says, we're going to do that and more. And privately, they're doing the exact opposite. That's Hollywood.
Wow.
So, but the sad part is the narrative then goes into the general populace. When you have powerful people that can simply say, we're actually filming without these rules and nobody's dying. That might change public opinion about certain things, but they're not going to say that. So they're gonna boost the official narrative that they're not following, which is Hollywood hypocrisy.
Yeah, truth is over here. All the layers of everything else is up here for us.
And that's part of that's the critique that a lot of people have of my industry, which is that it's promoting false propaganda. Sometimes it does so intentionally, and sometimes it does so like in this fashion, which is they're just covering their butts publicly. That's all.
Yeah, just they're almost being shown. Like, oh no, it was actually this. No, it was actually this. No, don't look. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. For me, when COVID came around, and I was thinking about what it would do to restrict filmmakers. Now, I thought that this would start bringing out the more innovative type of filmmakers that can attempt to go, okay, so this is what we got to work with now with the restrictions that we have. It sucks, but we got to do something with this. What can we do with what we got? How can we make the best that we can with what we have? Maybe you sacrifice some things in some other levels. Like, in a way, I'd say, the camera thing, if you can have it to where somebody's got some type of a handheld thing, maybe that's what you got to work with. If you can make a good story and you can still. That's all fine on smaller level productions. The problem is, when you're doing big scale television shows or movies where the expectation of the audience is very high, it's simply not sustainable. It's simply not sustainable to be able to do these things. I mean, I was developing a project last year that ultimately didn't go because of this environment, but it was a pilot that we were about to film, and it ultimately didn't go because people couldn't figure it out. But at the time, the producers we were working with and the director we were working with had come up with all these things of like, we're going to film, and we're going to have plastic shields here that won't be visible to the camera. I'm like, you're not going to do any of that crap, man. Of course, they couldn't do any of that crap. That'd be a lot of lighting reflecting off as well, probably, and other things. Audio wouldn't go through as much. Virtue signaling. They're all virtue signaling because they're all thinking everyone else on the call is going to turn them in to the COVID cops, right? Right. None of them actually want to do any of this, but everyone is afraid of what the other guy is going to say. So. I see. Wow. It's basically Hollywood is like the Crucible right now. It's the Salem witch trials, and everyone's trying to keep their head low. Well, I guess, would it be so bad if Hollywood, or if they were to make a show for, I don't know what type of program to give an example for, but if they were to make a show that was a lower budget, lower quality looking show, but it was, again, told really well, because we've had shows like, I'll just say, like Xena back in the day. I mean, that wasn't the best production as far as, what it looks like, but it was still, people liked what it was for what it was. There's other shows that had lower quality production, but were still able to be, pretty good. So I don't know. I see what you mean. There's one show that did it before the pandemic, before the lockdowns and all this stuff, which is Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai had no budget. It was on YouTube Red. Nobody was watching YouTube Red. And it has become my favorite recent show. I'm utterly obsessed with it now that it's on Netflix. I didn't watch it when it was on YouTube. And it had zero budget. It had like 2 sets. Like, it's like 3 sets. It's like this guy's apartment, their house and the dojo, right? Yeah. And funny thing is, with Netflix, they were given a huge budget and they managed to film out in Japan and other places, but they don't need to. That show is just about a bunch of people doing karate in the neighborhood. Doesn't require any budget, and they already did 2 seasons with no budget. Yeah, when they go to the there's not that many shots where you need to have a huge crowd of people present to do anything. That's what I appreciate about it too. I only saw season 1 of it so far, but it was I will say I just finished season 2 a couple of nights ago. I'm about to start season 3. Yeah, what I have been told is correct. It gets even better with every season. Season 2 is even better and ends with a great cliffhanger. And season 3, from what I know, what my friends who've watched have said, it's a quantum leap even higher because now they have Netflix money behind them, right? So, but it's one of the few things that's consistently getting better. And it was great from the pilot. So, yeah, well, let's hope. But that's one thing with shows, from my experience, or at least with movies and shows, that the more they add to them, the more of a risk they have to ruin their progress. I don't know if that's a common thing.
What do you mean by that? More, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you meant.
I guess like with Game of Thrones, for example, like it seemed like people mostly thought it was really good quality, and then like season, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8,
well, yeah,
they saw it as a decline,
or the underlying material,
or like what's Lord of the Rings. They had the perfect trilogy, and then they made the Hobbit ones. They're not so good. They're going to work on the Lord of the Rings show, which may or may not be good. Who knows? But I don't know. Star Wars. The more they keep on adding, it's hard to say if it's going up or down with it. The more you add to Terminator, the more you add to this thing, the less quality it seems to retain.
That tends to happen. It's sequelitis, and like I said, Peter Jackson is my favorite filmmaker, and I enjoyed The Hobbit. It is not at the same level as Lord of the Rings, and that's reality, because he tried to take a very sparse children's book and make it into something much bigger than it is. He tried to make it at the level of the Lord of the Rings, and the material doesn't support it. The Lord of the Rings books support the Lord of the Rings movies, right? But The Hobbit doesn't support what he did with it, and so that was the challenge. But I will say Cobra Kai is this rare exception where they are working on a zero budget, and it's getting better with each passing episode, each passing season. So,
do you think that more shows or movie productions should take more risks, or take on more challenges and going forward, or do you
what
think
do you mean by risks? I mean, the industry is risk averse.
I guess.
What do you mean by risk?
That's actually a good question. There's a lot of different variations this can go toward.
Because it's hard for me to answer a question where I don't know what risk means.
No. You're right. I'm not actually
Cobra
sure.
Kai, it was a risk putting that show. On first of all, on the avenue was put on YouTube Red that nobody had to watch, right? And then trying to resurrect this franchise 40 years later, and it was a risk from the way traditional Hollywood thinks, right? And yet it was absolutely perfect and correct, and proved to be exactly what the zeitgeist needed.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I mean more in the sense maybe where there's less popular or less well-known actors, or if they have lower budgets for certain things, if they try to tell a story that I don't know, isn't a reboot of some kind, like more original ones. But
remember, everyone in the industry is just trying to preserve their job. Nobody is actually trying to make a movie except maybe the writer and the director, right? Everyone else is just trying to preserve their job in that moment, right? And that's particularly the people financing the movies, right? And so, or the television show. Nobody's trying to think long term. They're just trying to think, can I get through today and not be fired, right? And so, going in and pitching this unknown show based on no underlying thing, I've been pitching stuff. For example, I've stopped pitching my own ideas. I write pilots. I write specs. I write spec movies. I write spec pilots. I said, you're not going to believe me and you're not going to buy something. So I'm going to just show you the pilot. Here's the script. And I've consistently sold scripts that if I tried to pitch them, no one would have bought them, because they're, characters no one's ever heard of, an idea no one's ever heard of. And then the execution proves it. Right. That's what has to be done. But that's you're dealing with people that, if most things in Hollywood fail just because those are the odds, and that's how the process plays out, no matter how well-intentioned everyone is. And so an executive is trying to keep their job, can say, well, I didn't know it was going to fail. It's the Lord of the Rings TV show. How could I have known it was going to fail? It has a built-in global marketplace for it, rather than unknown, original idea that we have that's completely untested. And it doesn't have to be anything. You just have to walk in and say there's a comic book that no one's ever read, right? There's a project that I was up for on Netflix that I ultimately didn't get, but it was a project that I pitched for. I was up against a couple other writers, and it was based on a series of self-published novels that no one's read these books, but you could go to Netflix and say, well, there's books about it, right? And there's almost no reviews on Amazon about it, right? But no one's really read these books. But you just have to say there's an underlying thing, and the person's job is preserved for one more day.
Right. Now I see what you mean. And the person who would accept that, okay, we're going to try to make that into the series, is risking their tail and their whole career essentially on if they try to make it and it fails, like on the book series that nobody knows about. And if the movie, or if they made a show and it doesn't do well, that could be the end of it. I see what you mean there.
Yeah, again, you took a risk. I mean, nobody here is here to take a risk except for there's three layers of risk, right? So people that have to be entrepreneurs in the system, and the only entrepreneurs are the writer and the producer, right? The director is still a hired gun, right? unless the director's writing their own material. So
Right.
the only people that are the true entrepreneurs in the system, the writer who has to create from scratch a blank page, right? And the producer who is essentially running around trying to make an idea happen, usually without any money, and then trying to find the writer and then trying to somehow pull it together. Those are the true entrepreneurs in the system. And those two are often adversarial, but they shouldn't be, because they're the only ones actually trying to get something made. Someone said that to me one time. He's like, nobody else is trying to make a movie, man. It's just you and the producer. The director's just trying to do their thing, right? And the actor wants their role to be the most important role and wants the final line to be theirs, even if it doesn't make sense in the script. And so nobody's thinking about the movie except you and the producer, if you got a good, that's it. Nobody else is trying to make a movie. Nobody else is. The executives, they're trying to survive the day and hopefully go to a cocktail party, right, at the end of the day with other Hollywood people. Everyone's just trying to survive. You're the only one trying to create anything.
Never thought about it like that.
It's true.
It's interesting. I guess my next question would be: so, is there a difference between like the Hollywood sphere of high budget films and the independent circuit? I don't really understand. The films.
It's all about the kinds of questions you're asking me. Like, of course, there's a difference. There's a huge budget.
Well, I guess so. What is
the difference you're looking into?
So, I guess like when people say, Hollywood's doing blank. Does that usually never include the independent projects? It's usually referring to, I guess, what's the definition of Hollywood? I guess because that gets thrown around so often nowadays.
System. It is the existing studio system that, of the major movie studios and some of the minor studios, whatever, that are linked up to the distribution outlets like the theaters and Netflix.
So it's like Disney, Sony, and they're connected to theaters and stuff. That's essentially Hollywood.
That's Hollywood. And independent is people that are raising money outside of that system. They are raising money, either they're financing it through their own pocket, or they're raising money through private investors. Their uncle, who's a rich dentist, puts money in, or nowadays in the current environment, people are at least crowdfunding projects to a certain level. I mean, I haven't heard of the $1 million, $2 million movie crowdfunded. It may be out there. I don't know about it, but I do know of movies that were crowdfunded for $100,000 that got made. The Tiger Hunter, it was made by a young woman that I know who was a UCLA film student who came up to me. I was speaking, I'm a graduate of UCLA, and I came back shocked. She came up to me. She was a young Indian Muslim woman with a full headscarf and everything. And she said, "Oh, you're a graduate of school. You inspired me so much. I have this idea I want to do this comedy set in the 70s in India, and about a guy who comes from a family of tiger hunters." I was like, all right, well, good luck with that. That seems very improbable to me. And then she went and she put up a fundraiser online, and then she raised $100,000, which she used to pay a professional screenwriter who I know well, who I mentored, who wrote the script for her. And then that script, she used the rest of her money, she filmed it, and then it got distributed, I think, by Universal. She made this little indie film, crowdfunded, and that's a visionary. She came up to me once, said, "I'm going to do this." 3 years later, it's on the screen in the theater, right? And it's a real movie. So that's somebody who made something happen.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't sure if the definition of I guess if an independent film is made, but it's not in if a movie's not released in a theater, is that just referred to as something else? Even if
theaters don't exist anymore as of now, so
I know that's why because that used to be the norm, was that
but independent films are released in theaters. Before all of this nonsense, right? Yeah. They may not be there for more than a week, but often you would try, especially if you believe that it could be up for awards, you would try to get it released on even if you had to rent out a theater for one weekend, you do that and you put it out there, and like 5 people show up, it's still officially a theatrical release, right? But independent film historically often found its greatest revenue stream from VCRs and then DVDs and now through various streaming outlets, right? So that those are the two streams. Those are within the structured studio system, and then these independent things. And Tolbert Kai was this thing in the middle because it was essentially doing this independent film with almost no production, with almost no budget on an untested streamer, which was YouTube Red, right? And so that was an unusual, rare thing that was in the middle. That was the last true independent project I think we've seen.
Yeah, well, I guess then that's a good point. I was going to say, I'm
sorry, I'm blowing away your questions because
you're good. No, you're doing them. You're answering them.
I have to be that way because I can't give you an honest answer.
No.
General question about how are things.
You're answering them so well that I'm trying to reassess how to approach my next ones with what you just explained to me. Okay, trying to get that down. So I was going to say with Gina Carano. lately. She wanted to do something with Ben Shapiro as a
Mhm.
independent film, I assume.
Yeah, well, he's not in the studio system. He's trying to create his independent studio, which will be financed by his own sort of conservative backers, right? And then, and if he can't, and I'm sure there'll be resistance towards distributing his material through the traditional Hollywood pipeline. So he'll probably put it out on various streamer sites. I don't know that Netflix will initially distribute anything until they see that it makes a lot of money somewhere else, right? And so he's probably, the whole system is probably going to have to be either he puts it out on BitChute or something else, right? Because I don't even know that YouTube will carry it anymore.
Or Amazon, I think, allows.
Amazon can, but again, all these places in the traditional system are now becoming very politically restrictive.
Mm-hmm.
So so that's I just think that anything within the current structure is not viable for certainly conservative filmmaking efforts, like Mr. Shapiro, and so they're going to end up creating their own distribution outlets. I mean, that's an inevitable thing, and what happened with Ms. Carano is it was sort of an inevitable historical moment that's going to lead to this inevitable other kind of Hollywood, a separate industry that's going to be created with more conservative themed projects, right? And they tried that multiple times in the past. With largely not a lot of success. They had some success with making family films that were sort of Christian films, right? And the industry didn't respect that, but made money on it, so they would distribute those, right? They didn't really like those films. They would make fun of them, but then they would take the money. They would distribute them, and those would be successful. Then you had things like Mel Gibson putting out Passion of the Christ, which the industry didn't want him to put out. And then he outsmarted them and made $600 million on his own self-financed movie, right? And that shocked the industry. But again, right now, there was never any kind of sustainable framework for conservative filmmaking. Mr. Shapiro is attempting to do it. I love Gina Carano. I have great respect for anyone who follows my Twitter knows that. I hope because while I may be personally very conservative on a lot of things, I have a lot of disagreements with Mr. Shapiro on politics, particularly the Middle East. And so my concern is I just hope he's not pitching her, the old Chuck Norris movies from 1982 where she goes and, hey, Tina, I want you to, here's a bunch of guys with turbans and just shoot them up, right?
Right, yeah.
That's sort of who he is. And I don't think that's who she is. So hopefully good out of this.
I'm assuming that it'll start kind of like how you said, where it starts a little bit more on the conservative side to be like the opposite of what it is, but then at some point, hopefully, it'll be more into the this is the freedom filmmaking here at some point.
It is. But again, who's actually interested in freedom filmmaking right now? It's people on the right.
That's
bifurcating.
That's the point, though, I guess.
We're bifurcating left and right filmmaking. That's what's happening.
Yeah, so I guess some of that leads into like with Cobra Kai. Some of its success, though, was a lot of it's due to the marketing, I would assume, because if nobody heard about that's what was happening, I guess that comes to I was kind of intertwined with
word of mouth. It was word of mouth. I resisted watching Cobra Kai because I have such affection for the Karate Kid, and I've seen people screw up, Star Wars and other stuff in these current iterations. So I just didn't watch it. And I didn't want to watch YouTube Red. I didn't care about that. But when it came onto Netflix, okay, well, I have Netflix, and I kept hearing word of mouth that this is an incredible show. So I finally watched it, and then I became word of mouth. And now it's become the number one show on Netflix as far as we know. So,
Yeah, so I guess that kind of goes. So that was like an original one they were trying to make. It's a sequel to Karate Kid, of course, but like with Netflix having like how many originals have they made now? Like over 1,000, or they tried to make 1,000 original movies.
I don't know the exact number. I mean, I think Netflix was already on the path to becoming the dominant force in traditional Hollywood before these events. Over the last year, it has solidified as sort of the go-to place for most people who are desperate to get something done, because all the traditional outlets, the traditional networks are bumbling around in this current environment and don't know what to do. And so Netflix has managed to crank out The Witcher and other stuff in this environment. It made the third season of Cobra Kai under these circumstances, and it traveled internationally to do it, right?
Yeah.
And so, it seems to have figured out how to film in this world. And so that's going to solidify its dominance.
Well, I guess my question would be more to what do you think about, as if they've probably released hundreds of original shows on Netflix, but how many of them have people actually watched? Like, because there's probably a lot of them that nobody heard about. And
I mean, I've heard of some guy. I was meeting with this guy. I didn't really like him. He was like, he sort of gave me a vibe of I don't really want to do business with this guy. But this was a couple years ago, and he was like bragging about all of his films that he had on Netflix. I checked it; they were on Netflix, but I mean, they were sort of low quality stuff that I would have thought is direct to DVD, back of the video store crap, right? And Netflix put them on, and I'm sure he's getting some money out of it. But Netflix will put anything on, right? And so
Scorpion King 5, yeah,
doesn't mean anybody's watching it. So yeah,
right, yeah. I guess would Netflix be considered part of the Hollywood sphere, or is that its own type of?
I mean, it's at this point, Netflix is Hollywood. Netflix was seen as this annoying competitor that was coming into the system only 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And in the last year, it's become it was already becoming the dominant force. In the last year, it was like Muhammad Ali. It just punched Foreman down, and the industry was done. So I mean, that's become the place to be right now. That's Hollywood at this moment.
Yeah, that's a good point then, right there. Damn. This has been going great, by the way, man. Are you good for like another 10 or 15 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. I can go another 15 minutes or so. Yeah.
All right, sweet. Yeah, these are some great ones, man. You've been knocking out quite a few questions I've had in my head.
Well, I just hope they are providing some illumination to this crazy industry. So.
Yeah, well, if anything, this is probably one of the biggest things that I've been struggling with in wanting to be a filmmaker someday. So I want to be a director, but then if I can't be one, I'd want to be a screenwriter at the least. But I'd still like to be a director because I like to work with people.
You can be a writer director. You can be both. Yeah,
but I guess the question would be I've looking at how things are with Hollywood, or with how people seem to be reacting to it, how people on sets react to how everything is these days, and how everything's changing, and all the views and whatever with it, that I'm not sure that I'd want to be in the typical Hollywood system, I guess, like in the normal system, because as you said, nobody wants to make a movie. They just want to do whatever with it. So I've been trying to look more into the independent type of area, I guess, with kind of like how
I've gotten that vibe from the kinds of questions you're asking. I mean, but I mean, that become more of an industry as Hollywood itself is, it's had its knees cut out and doesn't know what to do. So
so I guess like if that's it, I don't know. So you've pretty much answered a lot of the questions that I was going to have as backup.
The challenge is this: when people get so excited about the fall of Hollywood and the rise of independent film, that's going to be a generational process, because the problem is the expertise, the connections, and the leverage is still in the entire Hollywood system. And people, if they're being offered $10 million to work for Warner Brothers on a project, or a chance to work on unknown, independent project with Ben Shapiro, and there's a $500,000 worth of dentist money in it, right? Yeah. What are they going to do, right? They're going to work within the system that's already established, and that system isn't dead yet. It is injured, but the other system is in its infancy. And the problem is, this system of Hollywood has been built over 120 years, right? Mm-hmm. And so, in order for you to have a successful independent alternative, you have to woo away the mentors and the experienced people from that, and you have to have incentives for them to come and help build up your independent thing. And most people who are outside the system don't know how to do that. They don't know how to sustain that. I've dealt a lot with the Middle East, being a Muslim myself, rich Saudi guys approach me all the time, rich Emirati guys, whatever. I want to make a movie, right? And a lot of those situations end up becoming disastrous because they don't know how to do it. They have all the money in the world, but they're afraid to spend it, right? When you have money you haven't earned, like when your money is, my grandfather, somebody found oil on his land, right? You haven't earned it. Then you're afraid of losing your money because one business mistake, you could lose it all because you didn't earn it, right? And so you have all these people that want to create this sort of, this Eastern film stuff, who are then don't have the actual acumen to do it. And I've been watching that over 20 years of watching people from that region coming to me in particular. And then I try to hold them to Hollywood standards, and they're looking at me like I'm insane. I'm like, well, guys, you're actually not going to compete with Hollywood, or even give your own audiences, are watching Netflix. You're not going to give them the caliber of material until you raise your game to that caliber.
Right. You need the experience for it. And that's the thing.
People that can train you, because it's 120 years of apprenticeship of this industry. Everyone has mentors. That's what the system is. And if you don't have them independently, you're at best you'll be a flash in the pan. I mean, the people who made the Blair Witch Project, that's an independent movie. Yeah, and it even spawned a sequel and a little bit of a franchise, but they're gone, right? I mean, you don't hear about them anymore, right? I mean, and so you have these moments of intense flashes of the pan that disappear because there's no underlying structure to support that independence.
That makes sense. So, I mean, yeah, I think that the Comicsgate type of version, if you've looked in any of that stuff, the independent crowdfunding for comic books and they have YouTube channels and they try to get their own audience with it, and then they also try to sell to their audience their comic book that they have, and like that seems to be in a way what I think filmmakers in a way that want to be filmmakers someday should kind of look toward, also utilizing social media and YouTube to gain your following, gain your crowd. If they are interested enough in what you're doing, they can help push you to eventually be that word of mouth, as you're kind of saying, with everything. So that's kind of what I've been looking at as well. And
well, look, the only thing you can do is this. If you're thinking of, you keep saying aspiring filmmaker, there's no aspiring, just do it, right? You know, I was a lawyer 20 years ago. I wrote a script, I sold it, and now this is what I do professionally, right? So there's no aspiring. I just wrote something, I did it, and I got it out there. So what you have to do is you have to learn the craft, and I would urge that the first part of the craft that you learn is screenwriting, which is the hardest part, because I know a lot of directors, and right now we've having a moment where a lot of directors culturally in Hollywood are asserting themselves, over writers, and directors in movies have always asserted themselves over writers, but there's been a shift recently that it's become to the detriment. Wonder Woman 2 was a terrible movie. Wonder Woman 1 was a wonderful movie and the major difference is Wonder Woman 1 screenwriters were let go because the director wanted to write the script herself, and it didn't work. The script doesn't work. And you're a brilliant director as she is, the script didn't work, and so it's not a good movie. And so if the script doesn't work, then you've got nothing. You have no foundation at all. I know a lot of directors that are resentful of that reality and think of themselves as writers, but haven't mastered that craft. And so I've been going through a process with the people in my own life where you have directors who don't want to give the writer power, and then they can't do it without him. So you're trapped.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head with the writing thing. That's the one aspect that I've been trying to master the most lately, and that I've been learning a lot about with writing, is that the way that I used to write would be pretty, I guess I would say in a way it's kind of quick pace, surface level, where I'm thinking of it as I go, but I'm not thinking about how.
Then I'm going to give you a suggestion. Then just read the book that I read that I wrote sold my first screenplay after reading this book before I went to film school. It's called The Screenwriter's Bible by David Trottier, Trottier. You and anyone in the chat who wants to learn how to be a screenwriter should read that book. It's enough. It literally gives you the entire process of how to be both the format of what a script works, and act structure and storytelling. I sold 2 scripts after just reading that book, right, and following it, and learning my craft independently on my own without any classes, without any teachers. And then I got in the Writers Guild. I went to film school after I was already a professional screenwriter.
Okay.
So get Screenwriter's Bible. It's all about the one advice I will give you and anyone else who's watching this is it's like when I say don't be aspiring, just be what you are.
Well, I mean, I've made projects, but I haven't asserted myself as I am a filmmaker now, because I feel like those have just been test projects, or I've been figuring out the game.
Look, I have on my YouTube page, I have a couple of short film and a trailer that I made, and they're good and people like them, but what they are is learning experiences for me. I have another short film I've written. I see myself as a writer director. Right now I'm well known as a television writer. I'm not known as a movie writer because I've sold a bunch of movies, none of them have been produced yet. So I'm not known as that, and I'm not known as a professional director. That doesn't mean I don't intend to be all of those things, right? And so I'm training myself to do all of those things. And my first short film, which won a few awards, is a good short film. And even now I'm like, okay, it's a flawed short film. There's a lot of stuff I would have done differently, but I had to learn how to do it, right? And that is throwing myself in the first time. And so that's the major advice, is throw yourself in, just like Peter Jackson. You learn through the process. There's no you can't learn it by
that's how it's been going for me, is that I've been learning as I've been going with it. It's like, so far I don't have a cameraman myself, so it's all tripod based. So I have to try to do things to try to make it still feel like it's not static standard.
But, Robert Rodriguez never used a cameraman. He was the cameraman, right? He made all of his stuff by him. He didn't even use it. He was the cameraman. He was the editor. He was a sound guy, right? And he made entire movies like that, not just an independent thing. He made professional movies with Antonio Banderas, where he's the only guy on the set, right? So
Yeah, like I mean, I play as all the characters usually. I'm working on a thing called Jeff Apocalypse right now for my project from the screen. There's going to be a bunch of different characters. I'm actually working on more characters and trying to write the story for that right now for the script, and it's a big old project. But I guess I just haven't called myself a filmmaker yet with it because I felt like, I need to get to the title position. But I like the way you're putting it because I think you're right by you're doing it.
You are whatever you say you are, right?
Okay.
The only thing I would add to that was a corollary, right? Because I have somebody on Twitter that would always, say, I'm a screenwriter just like you. And then I gave this person advice, and then this person was all about, you talked about how you keep trying to finish one script. His was the opposite. He would start writing 10 pages of a script, get bored, and move on to another script and write 10 pages of that. And he told me, I've got 10 scripts I've written. I was like, really? How much? I literally had 10 scripts of 15 pages each. And I'm like, you're not a screenwriter. If you can't use one script, you don't say that. That's an insult, right? That's delusion. That's you're just dabbling in it, right? But if you're serious about it and you're trying to actually finish something, then you are a filmmaker. All
right. Yeah, I like that. I haven't looked at it in that way.
Think of things in ways you hadn't thought about. That's my focus.
That's good. Yeah, I'm learning quite a bit from this, man. I'm appreciating this conversation. This is pretty helpful here. I'm feeling better about the position about an independent filmmaker, I guess, with this, because that's the other thing I was looking at too, is that even with COVID and everything, Hollywood's still the big dominant game right here, and I guess
it will be the dominant game for decades.
Yeah, they will be. They're what people are comfortable with. Yeah, they're what people are comfortable with. They're familiar with it. They've had the game, and now there's new people coming in. They can't just. That's one thing I know too. Yeah, no matter what I do, I can't just automatically be on the top there. It's got to be a climb. It's going to be having to get to know people, get my work out there. That was the one thing too, is that I was like before, when I was writing things before, I was just writing things and not really doing anything other than that. And I'm like, I need to get something out there. Because that was what I was starting to feel at some point, was to actually get work out there. And I guess, probably about 5 more minutes we can go for real quick. Yeah. And last question, probably should have asked this toward the beginning or anything right now. Are there any projects that you're trying to work on right now, or that you?
No, I've got several projects. They've all been delayed because of the current situation. I've got, a television series I developed that's set in the Ottoman Empire. It's sort of an epic series like Game of Thrones, right? Working on that. I've developed a pitch for a series set during the Mughal Empire. The guys who built the Taj Mahal, and so those are in various stages of trying to get them out there in an environment that's been very hard, because even you're like, all right, I'm ready to go. I mean, like on the Ottomans, I've got a finished script that's ready to go. We even have a director attached, right? A very successful director. But it's just like the producers are like, well, we can't put it out until the market's actually taking, we can't put it out there if no one's buying anything, right? We got to wait for them to be ready. And so that's been delayed. And so those are the things that I'm working on. And, and anyone who wants to find out more about me, you can follow me on my, my Twitter page, which is my name, Kamron Pasha at Kamron
Pasha. I have a link to that in the description below too, if anybody wants to.
And my website, which I don't know if you have a link, but my website is, my name, KamronPasha.com. And I'm a novelist as well. And I've got 2 novels published. I will show them to you. I've got, my novel this is a historical epic, Mother of the Believers, on the birth of Islam from the point of view of the prophet's wife. So it's an interesting historical epic from a woman's perspective. And here's a second novel I've got published, which is Shadow of the Swords, which is an epic on the Third Crusade, Richard the Lionheart versus Saladin, the Muslim king. And they're both published through Simon & Schuster, and they're available, BarnesandNoble.com, Amazon.com. They're available through my website as well.
That one looks pretty cool. Has anybody approached you to adapt one of those into a short film or anything?
They're both based on screenplays that I wrote. All of my novels are actually originally screenplays that I wrote, and especially the Crusades one got a lot of interest and ultimately didn't sell. People it's a great script, whatever, but that's the town, right? You can have, it doesn't matter if you have a great script. It only matters if you have the right connections with the people behind it. So, and I'm still about 20 years into this game. I'm still developing those.
Nice. Yeah, it seems to be one where you're never at the most comfortable spot, right? It's always forever shifting in a way.
It is, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing. The one good thing in this horrible situation we've all been going through this last year is my industry is cracking. All of these sort of old, the old false gods of the industry, all the people that everyone knows, okay, that person's a hack, but they had the right relationships and they rose to a tremendous amount of power, and they're still terrible, right? But everyone's kissing their butt. Well, those people, nobody has time for those people right now. Everyone's just desperately trying to make something work. And so a lot of these sort of the old gods, the titans before the Olympians.
Yes. That's a good way to put it. I
And
like that analogy.
it's like this, you have to slay, Kronos for Zeus
Or
to
come through, and so on right there.
Yeah.
Well, I like that, man. Yeah, I wish that we could, do this more, but no, we
did, but it's again, I hope it was helpful to you, and it's just if nothing else, take my advice on buying that book on the Screenwriter's Bible. That's a practical thing you can start tomorrow on. And if again, it's all about your commitment. Yeah. I was in business school at the time. I was in an MBA program, and I bought that book because I was interested in becoming a screenwriter. And I read that book, and I wrote my first screenplay in class. When I was bored in class, I was just typing. Everyone thought I was taking notes. I was typing away on my screenplay. It's all about your commitment, and that's the screenplay that got me my first agent. So you just have to focus and get it done. Okay, yeah, I'm definitely going to look into that. I mean, if that's the one thing I want to take away from filmmaking, if that's all that I can, go back on that I want to be good at, that's screenwriting. Yeah, that's all. Yeah, if you can't tell a story, I don't care how good a director you are. That's just the illusion. Then you're just a cinematographer, right? Exactly. That's all you are. You're not a storyteller. And if you can master good storytelling, then the one thing the audience will forgive, you don't have great sets. Your camera isn't that great. It'll forgive everything except two things. It won't forgive bad acting, and it won't forgive bad script. If you've got a good script and good acting, it will forgive every other technical flaw of the film. Right. Yeah. My short film, Miriam, which is on YouTube, isn't a technically perfect film by any means. It's my first ever directing effort. Right. But the reason it won awards is that people like the script and the acting a lot. Yeah, which I'd say are the main qualifiers for a good film. So that's it. That's what we want to watch a movie for. It's a good story and good performance. Everything else will forgive. Very true. Very true. Just saying hello to the chat again real quick before we head out of here. This has been great. Love this. Hope you guys are enjoying this as well. Gannicus, yep, he's still holding off on finishing. I don't know what he's referring to. That's earlier comment. Season 3. I think he's talking about Cobra Kai. Yeah. So don't post any spoilers on that screen. I don't want to know any spoilers. Okay. Yeah, the final season. Joseph has lots of opinions, and he always has forgive me at the end. Joseph, you don't have to. You've recently been following me. Stop asking for forgiveness. Just stop. Say what you got to say, and people don't like it. They don't like it. Oh yeah. He just says, Kamron, to pronounce your name, and it's like Kamron. Forgive me. No, because he's saying Kamran or something on there. What's up? And all right, you got Entertainment Hackers in here as well. What's up, man? E-Hacker. Good seeing you around, broski. He says just passing by with the kids. Nice. Good seeing you. And with that, thank you guys for coming on in here. And I'm going to close us out with a little video. And I'll be seeing you guys later. Follow Kamron Pasha, and I got his link to Twitter below. And I'm going to play us out with a little video. You guys have a great one. All right, everyone. We're going to do this again together. I need your energy, everyone. Let's do this.